everybody, and welcome. My name is Christa of Practical Astros, and I'm here with my new local Asheville astrology friend, Brian. Hi, Brian. How are you doing today?
Hi, Krista. Doing pretty good. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me on today. Yeah.
awesome. We met at another now local astrologer event. Magna Baggett put a Saturn Neptune kind of playful artistic workshop a few months ago and got to meet some other astrologers, and Brian was one of them. So um, from that, Brian and I talked a little bit, and Brian has kind of in his future to start his own podcast. And so I just invited him to talk on mine first to kind of get those juices going a little bit. But Brian has been an astrologer for a long time. You began studying, it's been almost 20 years. Is that right?
Wow. Yeah. I hadn't put that together, but you're right. Yep.
2007, according to your
hmm
bio. So,
That's right.
but you opened up your practice about 15 years ago, back in 2012. So,
hmm
you're still a practicing astrologer now, correct? You still see
Yep.
clients?
Yep, I do. And through my website, people can reach out to book readings. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll share that at the end of the recording. It's SoulRise Astrology, which I really like. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead and share the screen um, if I can get this to work. You've gotten to study under some pretty cool astrologers,
hmm
and the one that gets my attention the most is Alan Oken. So, can you talk a little bit about how you um,
hmm
uh, became connected to him? And I put your
Sure.
website up here. I really love your logo. That's a really
Oh,
nice
thanks.
logo.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks. Um, well, yeah, yeah. The just to say that the logo is designed by a friend of mine named Jeff Lane, who is a designer out of Chicago, where I used to live, and yeah, it was a really beautiful sort of coming together of the minds. I had some
mm,
ideas, and he put them down as in concrete form, and then we came up with that, and I've just been really happy with it. Yeah, well, to speak to Alan Oken,
mm,
I met him when I attended NORWAC, the
mhm,
Northwest Astrology Conference. Um, I met him there in 2016, and I took a workshop of his. I had a pretty interesting moment where the following day was the last it was the last day. I was actually just having breakfast, getting ready to leave the hotel and head back home. And he happened to be having breakfast just like a few tables over. And he actually walked over to me and said, I have a feeling that, you and I can work together.
mm,
If you're interested in studying with me, let me know. And I said, absolutely. So I had emailed him. We did a little bit of back and forth, and then he took me on it was about a 3 year, if I remember right, 3 year apprenticeship.
nice.
And then he used to host these seminars in Lisbon, Portugal,
Mm,
where he would teach astrology, but he would also teach esoteric astrology. That was kind of his niche.
mhm,
And so I learned about esoteric astrology through him. Without getting too sidetracked about all that, it's a very different lens a very different lens on astrology, a different perspective on astrology. But it's a really beautiful one that really, I think, helped to deepen my own practice. So yeah, I felt really privileged to work with him, and sadly, of course, he passed away in 2022. And so yeah, and I've studied with I studied with a local astrologer in Chicago named Guy Spiro,
mm.
and I've studied the work of Jeffrey Wolf Green pretty extensively, evolutionary astrology, and Stephen Forrest as well.
Yeah.
But that's just like studying the material. I didn't get to work with them one on one
Mhm.
as much as that would have been amazing. But so evolutionary astrology is a real strong paradigm for me.
Mm,
I think that the way I practice astrology is probably more evolutionary than anything else.
mhm,
But also, you mentioned, at least I think you mentioned Carl Jung.
mhm,
But anyway, I've also been studying Carl Jung psychologist, and his depth psychology has also very much informed my approach to astrology as well.
Did you study at Pacifica?
I took a course at Pacifica,
Uh-huh.
and it was their course in applied archetypal astrology,
Hmm.
and so I have a certificate from there as well.
Right. My sister has her master's in counseling from Pacifica, and I
Oh,
thought for some
nice.
reason maybe we had talked about it, but yeah,
Yeah,
so that's kind of the lens that we'll be talking about today. I'm just going to leave your website up if that works, you know.
sure.
Um, Um, this is the website soulriseastrology.com. You have done astrology salons, kind of like monthly meetings in the past, and that might be something that you bring back in the future. But you definitely do readings, and this is where people can read your blog
Hmm.
and just get in touch and read a little bit more about you. But when you and I met and we are talking about what we can do, we talked a little bit about Uranus and Gemini, just because that's like the shiny new toy that astrologers are playing with,
Right, for
which
sure.
we will be playing with for a while.
Hmm.
But then you also mentioned just talking about looking at precession of the equinoxes, and it's not
Hmm.
just the equinoxes, as you said, it's also the solstices, right?
Hmm.
It's the
Right.
entire picture, but looking at it through a archetypal Jungian lens. So
Hmm.
the common phrase that even just people that have no experience with astrology, they've heard the phrase Age of Aquarius. And so
Hmm.
can you give us just like a snapshot of what an age is in an
Hmm.
astrological context?
Yeah, sure. So it can be a little challenging to describe without visuals, but I'll do my best. Um, Basically, the idea is that the point of the spring equinox, the where the sun is in the zodiac
Hmm.
at the relative to the constellations. We're not talking about the tropical zodiac, but if we think of the zodiac in terms of the constellations, um, it, when, for example, today on the spring equinox, when the sun, the constellation that the sun is in, or
Hmm.
that is behind it, if you could see it, is the constellation of Pisces. So that's why we're in the age of Pisces. And then slowly over time, the sun moves in reverse order through the zodiac very slowly. It takes
Hmm.
about 2,100 years for the sun for the spring equinox sun to traverse through a given constellation or sidereal sign. And so Robert Hand has pinpointed the exact year that Robert Hand, being an astrologer, has been
Hmm.
around a long time, has done a lot of great work. But he did an essay, I think this was back in the 70s or early 80s, where he was able to pinpoint the year that the spring equinox sun in the northern hemisphere
Hmm.
was aligned with the first star of Pisces, Alpha Pisceum, and that was the year 111 BC. So if we take the year 111, or if we want to round up to 100 BC and say that that's the start of the age of Pisces, move ahead about 2,160 years, give or take some change, and we start to move into the age of Aquarius. Because it takes that long for the spring equinox sun to move through the constellation of Pisces into Aquarius. Um, it's a bit more complicated than that because um, there's there's the sidereal astrology, and then there's the constellations of the zodiac, right? They're
Hmm.
not the same thing. And this is where things get tricky and technical. And I think a lot of astrologers who talk about the turning of the ages, they sort of gloss over this. They don't really get into the technicalities of how do you actually define the boundaries of a
Mm.
given age.
Yeah.
It's actually not easy. It's a difficult technical challenge. That said, I tend to go with, or at least what I've been working with, is looking at the boundaries of the age as being roughly aligned with the boundaries of the constellations,
Mm.
so that where we are today is very interesting because Aquarius, the constellation of Aquarius actually overlaps the constellation of Pisces. There's this like overlapping region of space between these two constellations, and that's where the sun is today. That
It's like a
when
DMZ of the two signs.
right. Well, either that or there's just so much tension because we're like
Mm,
leaving
hmm.
one sign and coming into the other one, and so we're in this great tension between two ages. And I think that that really fits, right? I mean, I think that for reasons we can talk about, we're still in the Pisces age, right?
Yeah.
I mean, um, um, Christianity being the most dominant religion is probably the most sort of obvious expression of that. But we're also clearly heading into the Aquarius age,
Hmm.
given how we are globally connected and technology is, advanced so far in the past, 100 years. Um, and so, we can see that we're in this overlap. It's as if we are in an overlap between Pisces and Aquarius.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but in terms of when we'll actually like um, be solidly in the age of Aquarius, that could be a couple hundred years. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
It also feels very Aquarian to kind of like see it before it arrives.
sure.
It's kind
Great
of like
point.
it's not there yet, but like because we are maybe in that shadow or
Hmm.
the premonition of an age shifting, um, that just also feels Aquarian. Like
Yeah,
in Hellenistic astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn
yeah.
is like the boundary, the edge, and it's like what's on the other side of that edge kind of has that Aquarian nature to it, as opposed to like what the limit is on the Capricorn Saturnian side.
Mhm.
It's like what is beyond is kind of an
Yeah.
Aquarian attribute. But just to reiterate the Piscean age, I mean, we both live in America. America is definitely infused and, from its colonizing settlers with the religion of Christianity. But just Christianity as a religion, it's a young religion comparatively. But the symbol of the fish is, throughout. Even like in your presentation, you were talking about like all of the different ways the fish were used. And something that I thought was interesting was looking at the two fishes swimming in different directions. Can you
Mhm.
speak a little bit about that, like the Christ figure and the Antichrist figure as like
Mhm.
these equalizing or negating forces that they
Mhm.
have? Like, what is the Jungian viewpoint of just that Piscean tension?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the most fascinating aspects of what Carl Jung himself wrote about with regards to the age of Pisces, was that he tracked the general psychology of humanity or psychological evolution of humanity um, through the age of Pisces and showed how the development of humans, the human psyche and human civilization has generally followed the form of the Pisces constellation. So the way that we draw that constellation, or the way that it looks, so to speak, is that you have a fish. It's two fish, right? And one fish is swimming up, so swimming vertically, and the other fish is swimming horizontally, and they're joined together by a cord um, that links them together, which gives you this, yeah, like you said, this feeling of tension of like trying to go, one direction or another direction. And if you extend the horizontal fish, if you extend the line of the horizontal fish and the line of the vertical fish, you get a cross, right? And the cross of Christianity, the Celtic cross, and the symbol of the cross, it's a very powerful religious or esoteric symbol. So the idea that Carl Jung writes about in his book Aeon, Aion, um, he refers to the time period of roughly 100 BC until I'm having to remember the dates. I might not quite get it right, but it's somewhere around 1500 AD, somewhere around the 16th century or maybe 14th, 15th century, excuse me. Um, there's this movement of the spring equinox sun through the stars of the vertical fish. And that's the time period of the development of Christianity from its tolerance within the Roman Empire to its becoming like the only religion of the Roman Empire, and then Western Europe sort of coming out of sort of consolidating Christian religion, and it becoming like the predominant religion of Western Europe, and that the orientation of Christianity is very linear, it's very vertical. So where like we are living this, corrupted life in our corrupted material form, and we're seeking salvation up there. God is up there, the
Yeah.
heavens are up above, right? So we're going from, from below to above. And this is very different, right, from the pagan religions that came before it, that where everything was about cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything was in a circle, right? But with Christianity, the spiritual orientation became vertical, became a line.
Mm-hmm.
And so cathedrals were built, with their tall spires, reaching up into the heavens. And um
Yeah, as
and
opposed to like earthen mounds or things being low to the
yes,
ground, circular in the earth, being, that lateral fish almost is like just being of the earth kind of at the horizon, um, as opposed to like going up and being impressive and making you literally look up,
yes,
to kind of have that ascension.
yes. And you think about the structures of empire or of governance that are hierarchical, that sort of mimic that, linear vertical alignment. Um, and and so, but when we get to roughly um, 14th, 15th century, well, of course we have the Black Death, the bubonic plague, and then coming out of that we have the Renaissance, and the eventually the Protestant Reformation, and then the Age of Discovery. So we have these periods of time where the um, rather than being oriented in this vertical way, humanity starts to become oriented in a horizontal way. And this time period, so let me just backtrack a little bit. So basically, what that means of being oriented horizontally is, first of all, we begin. Well, this is all very Western Europe centric, and
Yeah.
that there are reasons for that. But so Western Europe begins to expand across the globe.
Hmm.
Begins to colonize other lands, discover and colonize other lands, um, and and there's this general attitude that turns towards humanism. We get this with Ficino, for example, and bringing Greek philosophy back into vogue, and basically looking at the question of how do we, rather than just suffering our human life and finding salvation through death, through first spiritual renewal and then death. Instead, maybe we can find ways to make life here on Earth better, more tolerable for each other.
Yeah. Especially
And
coming out of the Black Plague.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Right. And so and of course the Protestant Reformation uh, brings forth this idea that one's relationship with God is something personal, not
Hmm.
something dictated from above.
Hmm.
Um, and and yeah, and again the age of discovery and moving outward, moving. So this horizontal movement of focusing on life on Earth rather than life, escaping life on Earth.
Hmm.
So that becomes the emphasis, and then of course we have the French Revolution, and um, the goddess of reason, and the effort to actually say religion is bad, We need
Mm-hmm.
to move in this direction of science, reason, the Enlightenment period. And that, of course, leads then into the Industrial Revolution and so forth. So so we get further and further away during this time period from the and in some sense we're getting humanity's moving away from some of the darker aspects of what I call the monotheistic revolution of the that vertical emphasis of life on Earth is bad, we need to escape, um, that kind of thing. And but then we start to move further away also from the what is a very essential dimension of existence, which is religion or the religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we start to venerate more the mind, maybe less so the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the dark side of it, because it leads to pollution and other problems in the world, um, where everything is about rational materialism,
Mm-hmm.
and we the world becomes disenchanted, the universe becomes soulless and a
Mm-hmm.
dead machine rather than a living thing. And and Jung was very clear. I mean, I think he described the what he called the religious function in the psyche as an instinct, as something that is very deep within the human psyche and very necessary to have a connection to something greater than the mundane world.
Yeah.
Have that connection to mystery that is so important.
Yeah.
It's sort of been lost.
Well, just as an example of, before we look ahead to the Aquarian age, that, we may or may not have one foot in already. Um, Previous ages, can you describe, what the age of Aries
Hmm.
was and what the age of Taurus before that and the age of Gemini and Cancer? Can you just briefly kind of encapsulate, and don't worry about the years so much because that's a
Yeah,
big ask for me to ask you, like get the
yeah,
dates, but just
yeah,
like overall, like what was the overall in human history, these what were these ages bringing?
sure. Well, if we start with the age of Cancer, roughly 12,000 years ago, we have, to me, this is one of the more fascinating correspondences, because this is the time period of the so-called Neolithic Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
the first agricultural revolution.
Yeah,
Basically, agriculture, animal husbandry, these is invented during this time. People begin to settle down in one place, and this is very Cancerian, right? Talking about food and tribes staying together in a single homeland, home space. And so that would be just very generally the age of Cancer correspondence. And then as we move into age of Gemini, we begin to have the first Proto-Indo-European languages begin to develop towards the end of the age of Gemini. It is also an age of trade, and networks of trade are, you think of Mercury and Gemini's rulership over commerce, and trades and crafts become developed during this time. And then if we look to the age of Taurus, this is archaeologists call this time period the Urban Revolution. It's the time of Old Egypt. It's there now there are basically money is basically invented during the age of Taurus.
just so
Systems of
Taurus.
banking. I know, right? Right. And I also find it interesting, you think of old Egypt and the building of the pyramids
Hmm.
and mummification, these the pyramids, still, I mean, they're so sturdy and they've lasted for thousands of years.
The persistence.
Persistence and preservation,
Yeah.
and yeah, exactly. It's so interesting all that
I
comes.
like that with the Gemini too, because it's that back and forth. It's trade is like a negotiation, and it
Yes.
involves a little bit of like a game, which is such a mercurial thing. But then
Yeah.
that kind of develops into established value forms of
Yes.
trade with Taurus. That's fascinating.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, yeah, that's and then of course, well, one of the things that I discovered that I found really fascinating was that right at the start of the Age of Aries, and this would be around 2200 BC, um, there was a what's called a massive aridification event. Basically, what happened was the entire Earth became dry and hot. Right? I mean, can
Yeah.
you get any more literal than that?
Yeah.
Um, and this was right at the start of the Age of Aries, and it was this massive climate event that affected the whole planet. And I don't know if I don't know how well we know like what caused it or what led to it. Um, but it's thought that this was one of the contributors to the fall of old Egypt at that at that time. But then also then you begin to see the rise of empires. The Assyrian Empire, the eventually the Babylonian Empire, of course, Greece and Rome, uh, uh, Roman Empire. The Roman Empire consolidates as an empire with a um, dictator just at the end of the Age of Aries. Arguably, it was an empire for a while before that, but um, even though it was called a republic. So just to say, like the Aries age, it shows development of empire, of conquest, of conquering other lands and other people and assimilating them into one's own sphere. Um,
And I think you also mentioned in your lecture about the rise of like the hero myth really
hmm,
coming out of this age too.
yeah, yeah, and that brings up something that Jung talked about with regard to the age of Taurus that a lot of religions during the time of the age of Taurus were, they venerated the bull. You have these bull gods or bulls and bull sacrifices and things like that. And then during the age of Aries, it's the you have lamb sacrifice, right? So the animal symbol that is sacrificed changes from bull to lamb, and then with Pisces you have the fish. Um,
So
and
what's
I,
Aquarius?
right, I
Is
know,
it
right?
like
I know.
a
I thought the same
sacrificing
thing.
our data? Is
Right,
that our
right.
offering to the gods? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a really interesting point. But I mean, we might say that Aquarius has to do with, well, one of the things that I think about Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, is that from a psychological point of view, it's about reclaiming our projections of divinity or withdrawing those projections. So rather than projecting ultimate good and ultimate evil out there, God, Satan, and whatever, through these images, we reclaim that divinity, that good and evil within ourselves. That everything we see as good or divine and everything we see as evil or corrupt is part of the human psyche. And then where do we go from there? I mean, that's I think a challenging prospect, but I think is part of what's implied by the Age of Aquarius, and maybe that implies a kind of sacrifice of you know a, a certain way of being within the psyche, something like that. Um, yeah. So I'm sorry, you asked a question, and I don't know if I
I
responded
I
to it.
think yeah, so that basically catches us up to where we're heading. Um,
Hmm.
and just to throw in there, we don't have the visuals up of what precession looks like, but we are not just spinning around the sun. Like it's all moving very fast through the universe. And
Yes.
that speaks to why this is changing. It's not like I think it's easy to think because we experience our gravitational relationship to the earth. Things are not spinning constantly, of just of how quickly um we are spinning through space. And
Hmm.
so we're that just that's part of why things change. It's like what 1 degree every 72 years. It's like this. It seems like it takes a really long time, but fundamentally, it's like we're rapidly changing. And so feel if we think of just like barreling towards this next age, it seems like time itself is exponentially speeding up too. Um,
Mhm.
and that really describes Aquarius to me of just like having um, this expediency of information and like that's what I think we're already experiencing of just having so much information. I think it's accelerated with Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini. And then whenever anything goes into Libra, just plugs it right in for things to get super fast.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when I think about just what's ahead for the age of Aquarius, and there's something that you said about like reclaiming that for ourselves,
Mhm.
including like what we project out that is negative.
Mhm.
There's ideas of like, the age of Aquarius will come save us, but it's opposite of that. It's like we have to save ourselves as the symbol of the age of Aquarius. It is taking that ownership back and taking that responsibility back, which is no easy feat because we all have to individually do it to collectively make this larger shift. And it looks very different for everybody. There's no playbook to it. That's being on that other edge, the other side of that edge. Um, so with that, like from your perspective, with, your spiritual and astrological and psychological, um, uh, education and theory, how do you, I guess, advise your clients, like looking
Mhm.
ahead at this age of Aquarius? What do you advise them on in order to kind of embrace this change on
Mhm.
a personal level, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think that what is always essential is that we remain focused on our spiritual work, whatever that might be for us. And um, a part of that for me is being aware of what how we are projecting our unconscious psyche so that when we are experiencing a challenge, um, that we be able to step back and look at that challenge in terms of how is it making us more conscious? Um, how does this challenge help me become more aware of myself at a deeper level of who I am, of what I'm capable of, and both good and bad, like, or we could say functional, dysfunctional. I mean, when we look, whenever we're faced with a challenge, we're faced with aspects of ourselves that maybe normally we wouldn't look at or face within ourselves. And and whenever we do that spiritual work, in other words, whenever we're looking deeply within ourselves and becoming more conscious of our own inner dynamics, we are doing the work that is feeding into the Aquarian age. Um, and so to me, that's really important, and it's going to be different for every person, just depending on partly it's the chart, right? We look at the chart and we look at the lunar nodes, we look at other aspects of the chart that might be pointing to the essential work that the soul came into the life to work at. And through that development of consciousness, we are each one of us helping to bring the age of Aquarius into being. Now, I don't see the age of Aquarius as, as you put it, that it will save us or that it's going to be, this wonderful golden age of total harmony and bliss. I think that the Aquarius age is a period of time where humanity is getting really serious about understanding its responsibility to itself and to life on Earth. And we could say humanity. deeply understanding its connection to all life on Earth, that it is part of it, it comes out of life on Earth. It comes out, we are, we are creatures of the Earth. And that is a really important factor. So one of the ways that I've looked at the precession of the equinoxes or the turning of the ages is that we're not just, as you mentioned this earlier, we're not just looking at the spring equinox. We're also looking at the solstices and the fall equinox. Um, and so if we take those other cardinal points into the picture, um, we have the Aries point moving into Aquarius, but we also have um, the Cancer point, the IC of the world chart, if you will, moving into Taurus, right? So this need to ground into the earth, to recognize the earth as our home, and be nurturing to it as we are nurtured by it, I think is an essential part of the Aquarian age.
It's a
As
great
and
point. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And so then there's that, and then there's the humanitarian dimension of Aquarius. So things transitions between ages tend to be pretty rocky.
Mm.
So this, it may not be an easy shift. I think we can see that out there in the world already. But our, is that, like, we're here to do the work we're here to do.
Yeah.
And we're not here by mistake. We're not here by, some random fluke or accident. Like, there is reason, there is purpose to why each one of us is here. And we each have a part in moving into and creating the future that is coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, I went to a lecture by an herbalist, Rosita Arvigo, and she was the title of the lecture was The Dharma of Healers. So she's speaking mostly to herbalists,
Mm.
but how she was speaking was it could have been given to any profession. If you were doing your soul's work, like that's all you can do. And like there's different ways for you to make sure that you're nurturing yourself so that you can do it. But she had this quote, and I sent it to a friend because it felt appropriate. And it was, um, let me see if I can find it. It was a Hindi saying. It says, I have spent many days stringing and unstringing my instrument while the song I came to sing remains unsung. And
Mm.
it's, to speak to like if you're always trying to get ready to like bring forth what you're here to bring forth, you're never going to get it perfect. And you can be
Right.
stringing and unstringing your instrument, but the longer you delay that song will still be unsung. And that's what I feel like if we can only sing in our own voice with our own accents, with our own enunciation, but and it'll never be perfect or ideal. And bringing it forth with its humanity, with its humility, with its imperfections, bringing it forth, like that's really the work. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't know what my soul's work is, like you can visit an astrologer. We
Hmm.
can help like shine light and be like, does this sparkle for you? Does this feel like maybe the area of life that you are really called towards? Because there are places in your chart that you can see that, but also just deep reflective work. And uh, you know, you might know in the back of your head what that is, but just as like a little kick in the pants, like stop stringing and unstringing your instrument.
I
Like
love
just
it.
start playing, you just start singing it. And the sooner that we all kind of get on that and without distractions or busy work or side hustles or worry and all this stuff, like we will always do those things, but choosing that soul's work is really the simplest and grandest thing that we can do. And to me, that is that collective energy. There's the phrase, many hands make light work, and then, as astrologers, we're kind of light workers in that sense. It's like the more we bring our own light to our own lives, if we're all doing it, we can really accelerate that sort of
Mhm.
connection to each other, to the natural earth. I absolutely love the idea of that connection point moving into Taurus and reconnecting with the cycles and the nourishment. and the earthly beauty and pleasure of Taurus, as the age of Aquarius is kind of coming in. So thank you for
Hmm.
that. It was really lovely.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any other thoughts just on the age of Aquarius before we wrap up?
Well, I think that something that you're evoking that that is really essential and important to the age of Aquarius and to how we get through the transition into the age of Aquarius is community. Community is very important, and not you know I think that word can sound a bit abstract, or we can have just ideas about what we think a community is, but basically being open to support from others and being open to be supporting to others, um, and putting ourselves out there, going to, whether it's just going to a workshop like the ones you're describing, or just getting in conversations with other light workers, or just anyone on their spiritual path. Not everyone is seeking to be on a spiritual path, and not everyone is gonna um, sort of jive with our energy. But it's so important to find the people who do, to find our soul tribes and to nurture those communities. Um, I think you mentioned the astrology salon. I used to host an astrology salon, a monthly event. I hope to start doing that again, um, and as a way of nurturing community. Because even if people are coming together, and it doesn't really matter if you have like a technical understanding of astrology or not, to bring a community together to talk about um, the concepts and to talk about personal growth and collective growth, and how do we nurture a spiritual life, and how do we find topics that we can discuss together that connect us, and how can we bring some of our own personal story, even the things that are very vulnerable to us, into a group that we feel is safe to share with. I think all these things are so important as part of the transition to the Aquarian age. And so I know you're doing that work, and I'm working on doing that work, and wanting to, and planning to do more of that work of nurturing community, bringing people together. I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's great advice. Even, if you're not an astrologer, just having I look at it as just concentric circles. You just,
Hmm.
you might throw a tiny pebble into a pond, but that reverberates out. And, having dinner parties, it's a lost art.
Yeah.
Having dinner parties and, just knowing, we're in Western North Carolina where we experienced a natural disaster of Hurricane Helene. And so it is fresh on our minds of how
Yes.
vital community really is. And it doesn't take a natural disaster to understand that, but we all really understand it because of that. And
Yes.
just knowing that when something out of out of your hands happens, you drop socioeconomic, politics, gender, race, everything just drops, and you were just helping another human with what they need. And that concentric circle really does um, show its power in that tiny little drop that you put in. So,
Yeah.
finding the people that have you have good resonance with, but also finding people that you don't, and really like community also means just like
Mm-hmm.
standing up
Yeah.
and standing with people that maybe you don't have a lot in common with. That in itself can also build community. I think that it's done a lot, in the online places, but it's less so in real life, and it's harder. Like community work is not easy work. It's a lot of boring work. And if I
Right.
think of the thema mundi, Cancer on the ascendant, the eighth house is Aquarius, and the eighth house. Andrew Watt, who's an astrologer, he's like the eighth house is like waiting in the line at the DMV. Like it's not all just deaths. It's just like a lot of that just stuff that you have to put up with. And if I think of like building
Huh.
community with the Aquarius being that eighth house, is a lot of it's like showing up on a Thursday night when you're tired, but you want to support, your neighborhood coalition, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's not always easy work, but it can build so strongly just with that dedication, which I think Aquarius can have, like when it's a fixed sign, so it can really build good dedication with righteous energy. And so, however community looks for you, play around with it. But definitely put in that work because I feel like it will help accelerate your own connection to your wherever you're living, and just also your own personal work. It's always surprising the people that you
Yeah.
meet that you maybe didn't expect. So,
Yeah. And it can be so, you know, it can be very vitalizing or even
mm-hmm,
invigorating to
mm-hmm,
step out of your own, your own energy field, step out of your own problems, your own, and be engaged with others.
yeah,
And so often, just doing that, stepping out of your comfort zone for the sake of, being present for other people and be
mm-hmm,
part of a collective engagement of some kind can be very, very energizing as
yeah,
well. So, yeah,
that makes life interesting.
that's for sure.
All right. Well, Brian, thanks so much for sitting and chatting. I've got your website right up here, soulriseastrology.com. You can go here and go to readings, fill out the form. And when the astrology salon comes back at some point, you can click on it right
Mhm.
here. But you can read more about Brian's work on Soul Rise Astrology. You can read the blog. You do a lot of mundane work, which
Mhm.
I find really interesting. So check out Brian's work here, and I'll put all those in the show notes. I made a note. I'm going to see if I can't find that Rob Hand article and put that link to with
Okay.
the with that. You said it was 111 BC.
Yeah.
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 See if I can't find that to link that to.
Okay.
And yeah, any last words before we sign off?
Uh, no, nothing that leaps to mind, other than just thank you. Thank you for this conversation. It's
Yeah.
been wonderful. It's been great to be on the program with you, and nice to have a, fellow astrologer friend in the area.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got connected.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and thanks, Brian. We'll see you next time.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Like and subscribe.